FBI Director Christopher Wray says he will resign at the end of the Biden administration. It's an announcement that came just last hour. President-elect Donald Trump had already made it clear he would replace Wray with loyalist Kash Patel.
It's important to remember that it was Trump himself who appointed Wray, a fellow Republican who still has 3 years remaining on his 10-year term. We're, of course, covering all the angles of this story. CNN's Evan Perez, Kristen Holmes, and Lauren Fox are on the story. Evan, first to you at the Department of Justice. What are you hearing?
Well, Boris, this was a little bit of a surprise. The FBI director does an annual all-hands meeting with employees around the country, and what happened today was he moved up that traditional meeting that he does, and in this case, he announced that he was planning to resign. He's resigning at the end of the Biden term, which is, of course, January 20th, and ahead of the arrival of the new president, Donald Trump. Now, as you pointed out, Donald Trump had already made clear that he plans to replace Christopher Wray, that he was unhappy with the leadership of the FBI, and he had already chosen Kash Patel, who has begun making the rounds on Capitol Hill to be confirmed as the next FBI director. Now, the FBI director held a meeting last hour with employees, and here is some of what he said. He said, "After weeks of careful thought, I've decided the right thing for the Bureau is for me to serve until the end of the current administration in January and then step down. My goal is to keep the focus on our mission, the indispensable work you're doing on behalf of the American people every day. In my view, this is the best way to avoid dragging the Bureau deeper into the fray while reinforcing the values and principles that are so important to how we do our work." Now, one of the things that we know behind the scenes that's been happening, Boris, is that the director has been meeting with people he knows, people he trusts inside the Bureau, to try to figure out how best to do this. The consideration here was, do you resign before January 20th, or do you wait for Donald Trump to come in and do the actual firing? And in the end, the director decided that one of the things he wanted to do was to find a way to say goodbye to the employees. He's been serving there, obviously, close to 7 years of the 10-year term. Part of the pushback that he was getting inside the Bureau and from people here at the Justice Department was, you can't just leave because that normalizes the idea that you can just replace FBI directors when you just don't like what they're doing or their work. Donald Trump, of course, fired James Comey in 2017, and he appointed Chris Wray. Chris Wray still had 3 more years left on that 10-year term. But some of that consideration, I think, changed over the last few days. You started seeing Republicans in Congress, Chuck Grassley, for instance, sending a letter saying that he lacked confidence in Chris Wray and the FBI leadership. That is part of what you see maybe changing the calculation here for the FBI director.
Yeah, no doubt. Evan, thank you so much. Stand by for us if you would. Let's go to Kristen Holmes, who is live near Mar-a-Lago. What's the reaction like coming from inside of Trump's circle, Kristen?
Well, Brianna and Boris, we just got a statement from Donald Trump on Truth Social moments ago where he is essentially celebrating the resignation of Christopher Wray. Unsurprisingly, he says the resignation of Christopher Wray is a great day for America as it will end the weaponization of what has become known as the United States Department of Injustice. Obviously, we've heard him say this before. "I just don't know what happened to him. We will now restore the rule of law for all Americans." Under the leadership of Christopher Wray, the FBI illegally raided my home without cause, worked diligently on illegally impeaching and indicting me, and has done everything else to interfere with the success and future of America. It goes on, but I do want to kind of stop here because I think this is really the key of where Donald Trump's head was at when it came to Christopher Wray and the FBI. This was the real turning point with Christopher Wray, was when his house was searched, not raided, but searched in 2022 for classified documents by the FBI. This ultimately led to his indictment, Donald Trump's indictment in 2023, but this was clearly a turning point for Donald Trump when it came to Christopher Wray. Now, it was unsurprising to some in Donald Trump's circle that Christopher Wray decided to resign because there really were only 2 options, as Evan said, to resign or Donald Trump was going to fire him so that he could install Kash Patel, or at least nominate Kash Patel officially and have him go through the process. Donald Trump was intent on getting rid of Christopher Wray and starting over at the FBI. And what we have seen on Capitol Hill, and I know Lauren will probably talk more about this, was a more receptive audience to this idea of getting rid of Christopher Wray and putting in Kash Patel, more receptive audience among senators when it came to Kash Patel than even Donald Trump's transition team was expecting. And I will remind you that just a few days ago, Donald Trump was point blank asked if he was going to fire Christopher Wray, and what he said was, well, I'm putting up Kash Patel for the job, so it would seem that he has to have a job to take. There has to be an opening there, and we're going to get to that opening either way. And clearly, the way Christopher Wray decided on his own accord was to leave with a resignation rather than wait for Donald Trump to take action and fire him.
Yeah, the writing was on the wall for Wray. Kristen Holmes, thank you so much. Let's go out to Capitol Hill now with CNN's Lauren Fox, because Evan alluded to this a moment ago. Lauren, lawmakers had kind of been telegraphing to Wray that he should consider resigning.
Yeah, exactly. And just a few minutes ago, I actually talked to Senator John Cornyn. He's a senior member of the Senate Judiciary Committee. And I asked him, what is your initial reaction to this news? And he said this is probably for the best. Now, he called Wray an honorable guy. He said the politicization of the Justice Department was something that, in his view, had happened before Wray had actually taken over. But he said clearly Trump did not have confidence in the current FBI director. And he said this was probably the most straightforward and best thing for the department. I think you heard that echoed in what Evan said that Wray delivered to his employees earlier today. But one thing to keep in mind here is that this was all coming amid the backdrop of Republican senators like Senator Cornyn meeting this week with Kash Patel. And Cornyn told me just a couple of days ago that barring any unforeseen circumstances, he was prepared to potentially vote for Kash Patel. Now, he was asked, if Kash Patel gets this job, are you confident that he is going to be able to return the Department of Justice to being an agency that Americans, including MAGA world, can support and think is not politicized? And he said time is really going to tell. He did not give a definitive answer, and that is coming from someone who said that he is prepared to vote for Kash Patel in this moment, barring any unforeseen circumstances. I also talked to Senator Ted Cruz, another member of the Judiciary Committee, who's a Republican, who said, look, this is the best thing because the writing was on the wall. This is where we knew it was headed. It's better for Christopher Wray, perhaps, that he'd make this decision rather than be forced into it in just a couple of weeks.
Yeah. Lauren, thank you so much. Let's go back to Evan Perez now at DOJ. Evan, you have some more on what it was like inside the room as Wray announced this. This was like a bureau kind of town hall event.
Right, Brianna, it was a standing room only crowd inside this conference center there at the FBI headquarters just across the street from where I'm sitting. And we're told that, there were people who were anticipating that perhaps something might be coming today. And certainly once he was finished with his remarks, there was a standing ovation, a full standing ovation for several minutes. There were some people who were seen crying in the room, again, to reinforce that there is there is a lot of respect for Chris Wray inside the FBI. I will say that among the retired FBI corps, the people who have left the bureau, there is a certain amount of dissatisfaction with Chris Wray, and part of it because a lot of them, frankly, are Trump supporters, and they don't like some of what the FBI has been doing the last couple of years. And so, what you see though from the troops, the people at the FBI, is certainly a lot of respect for Chris Wray. He's well liked among those FBI employees, and you saw that today as he made his remarks.